Hello and welcome to How I Made Wooden Frames. My name's Rob Kerr. I have some hives in Melbourne, Australia. So I've got a couple of hives. I'm building frames to gain experience. I don't have to build a lot of frames because I've only got a few hives, but to me knowing how these things work is important. These frames that I'm making are intended for wiring and the use of wax foundation. Probably the biggest thing I realised during this whole exercise was that most of what I need to do is think about the impact on the bees when I'm doing things. In this case, it's bee space and other space in the hive. Bee space is for bees, and other space can be for the wrong things or cause the bees more work. I buy my frame sets from the same source to reduce variations in materials and sizes, and I hope you enjoy what you see next. So here's a few examples. I have some polystyrene boxes, and here I've just pushed all the frames to the left-hand side, and there's about a 5-6 millimeter gap here. So my first question is there enough bee space if my frames are irregular? And there is enough, just. And there's plenty of room over here. My habit is to adjust the frames so that they're even in the box. If you have wonky frames, then you can have some consequences you may not desire. This is the normal frame, so there's a bit of space here. Here, no bee is going to fit inside there. Bees, maybe they'll get to about here, but what happens to all this? Is this where the hive beetles hide? On this frame, the one with the washer is a bit twisted. This end of the frame at the bottom is heading this way, and the other end of the frame is heading over this way. So you've got a big gap here, a little gap here. These frames are designed for two bees to work back to back. They can't do that here, and they're going to build funny comb, or if it's honey that's being stored here, and if it's brood there'll be excess space because the bees only need a certain depth of comb to raise brood. The underneath view, you can see here that this is that same non-rectangular frame which is hard up against the edge, and the others have got enough space basically for the bees. There's another view of that, and that's the other end, so I've got extra space here. If you put the frames end top to bottom, they'll fit nicely like this. You can also just use two frames together. I'm pressing down on the far end so that the top bar of the frame is hard parallel, and as you can see it's almost touching down the bottom. It's a little bit of gap down the bottom, but it's a much bigger gap here. And here's one where the frame is both twisted and not rectangular. And when you put it on the wiring jig, it's even more obvious. So this is a nice steady frame that's even on each end. Here's a twisted frame, very much, a lot of gap. The rattling will drive you crazy. And here's a view looking from the base of the frame. So you can hold the frame without a wiring jig, obviously, and just check the parallelness of the top and the bottom bars. And here there's the side view of a frame that's not twisted, and here's the side view of a frame that is twisted, so that you can see it that way as well. I hope you enjoy the video. So if I put a nice, an unhappy frame, okay. I've balanced two pieces of wood to show that the top of the frame is actually warped. So this is my frame jig. It's made up of two rectangular boxes with a lot of attention given to whether this is square and this is square, but also on the inside in both directions as well. My jig consists of the outside box and an inside box which fits in that way. I've added, I don't know what the normal one, there's no normal, this is just how I do it. I've added a screw here and a screw here, so that when I end up putting the sides in here, and I've got my 9 sides, I can screw in so that they all get jammed up tight and hard against the back, up against the backboards, and they all should be parallel. The middle one is so that I can sort of, when I put this in here, I make sure they're all nice and tight in that edge, and then I'll push that in here to hold the inside frame nice and tight. So I've got frame, the bottom of the frame, got my internal bit that will help keep it all steady. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I want to use 2 of my reused frames. They're going to be up the front. So these reusing frames have got warped top bars. I'm going to see if I can build a frame with a warped top bar that is not warped. Oh, there's a bit of glue I didn't need to lose. So because these side bits are never actually completely straight, especially if you've been storing them for a while, they'll warp somewhere, the wood keeps sliding around on itself. So when I try and keep these edges, stop them thing, I'm going to have to hold right up the end here. Squeeze that tightly, put in some glue. So it's relatively tight. What I do need to do is I want the end of the top end of these to be sticking out the bottom, because I'm going to make this into a whole solid case and then turn it upside down and put these on the top. But if these are not sticking out the bottom here, then I'm not going to be able to place these on. So I'll just slide that under there to raise it a suitable amount. And you see them all pop down. And I'll put this one under here. I'll jam that up there, screw in my middle one. Screw in this one. See them shifting a bit as they all bunch up. So now they're all pretty steady. So start that way. That way. Hold them nice and tight. So then I've got this one nice and steady here. I've screwed that one in. I'm going to screw this in to make them tight. I'm not too worried about, I'm trying to make them, tap them in. There's a bit of a gap. So I'm starting with the bases first. And I've got, as I say, I've got these 2 reusing ones. So that's going to go on there. It's going to go on there. At this stage, I just press them in. If they'll go in. Then I've got my new ones. Some of them slide in really easily, and some of them don't. And in fact, I'm going to just work on one end first. And now, what I'm trying to do is make sure that these edges are close together. So, probably worthwhile doing that. I've just learnt that trick then. Whenever I'm hitting one of these edges with a hammer, whether it's just tapping them in or nailing them, I've always got my hand here to absorb vibration and stop the other ends popping up. So these are, I think they're called cement nails or something. So they're quite sort of abrasive on the outside, and also I think it's when you hit them, when the friction goes in with the wood, something slightly melts and then re-glues itself. What I do find is that some of the nails are not well formed. So you might be able to see that one's on this right side. It's got a flat top and the other one's got a pointy top all the way around. So whenever I come across one of these, I figure it'll probably dive off in the wrong direction, so I don't use it. So again, when I'm hammering, I've got my hand on that edge, just so that it doesn't bounce all the way through there. I'm just going to place some nails first. Some of them I just check to see whether the nail's out too far. These are all still in position. They're upside down. So this thing's going to probably slip down again. Don't think it'll be too much of a problem now. Again, leaning on the thing. I'm more worried about vertical in this line. If I'm a little bit that way, it's not good. If I'm a little bit forward or backwards, it's not going to matter too much because there's plenty of wood to take that up. It's a bit thicker, obviously, at the top bar. Yep, these haven't come out yet. So in theory, that's the end. Get them out. I need to undo all my holding screws. In theory, I can just lift this off. As you notice, some of the bases, the length wide bits, and then I can pull this out of the middle. And in theory, I've got parallel frames. To test them against each other. So there's a little bit of shift. Gonna say they're all good enough. This is the one that had the bent top. Because according to my eye, the top is still bent. The top here is still twisted, but I've managed to get a frame that's not quite so twisted. Now I've made the frames up. One way I'd use to sort of check the rightness of everything is just to stack them all up. So you'll notice they're alternating, you know, head, top, 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 etc. So what I'm looking for is sort of like a big shadow here and not much shadow here, so that sort of needs to go that way. That one can come that way a bit. So they're not too bad. There's up to a millimetre variation. What I'm also looking for is any nails that have come through coming out this way and on the inside. See if there are any nails. So I've got one or two nails. So at this stage, my solution is just to hit it a bit harder. I hope you enjoyed watching the video of me making my frames. I've written my process down here, not in great detail, but there's enough of it there to keep you on the right track. In terms of results, having a bunch of side pieces together to spread the glue, it gets it more even and doesn't waste as much. Most of the frames were pretty square, even the ones that were reused pieces of twisted top bar. Just remember that the ends of the top bars and the bottom bar usually just extend fractionally beyond the bars that are fitting into them. So sometimes that can just catch if you've got your sizing too strict on your jig. How perfect should my frames be? May not be the right question. I guess for me, it's a case of what are the factors that I need to make sure are being supported or not inhibited. So here's a quick summary. So obviously if you've got a nice rectangular flat frame, you've got B-space, lifting frames in and out, they're going to slide easily. The comb production is going to be nice and even on each side. There's going to be the right spacings for brood management by the bees and between the honey frames as well. And you're less likely to create spaces where the pests like small hive beetle might hide out. You're either going to create space for the pests to live or work for the bees because they're going to try and block off those spaces that they can't access. So for the parallelogram, I think bee space and lifting the frames start to suffer. You definitely create some spaces where the pests are going to live. For the twisted frame, again, bee space can be interfered with. Lifting the frames can get tricky because especially when they start building honey out in certain ways, they're just not going to fit together well. Comb production with the brood, you may end up with not enough space to manage them or strange comb. And for pest inhibition, it also creates lots of spaces where the pests might live. So in summary, yep, bee space. When you're doing things, it's really a matter of not whether it's exactly square or flat, but whether when it works in the hive, it's going to leave enough space for the bees to move around. And then for the other space that is either too big or too small, will they spend time and effort creating excess burr comb, or will they spend time and effort creating, filling up cracks with lots of propolis? And the interaction between the parts of the hive, it's obviously easier if things are nice and square. They'll just be able to move around, keeps the beekeeper happy and as well as the bees. I hope you've enjoyed my experience. Inspired by the beekeepers, new and old, and visitors at the Collingwood Children's Farm Apiary, my mentors and friends.